My name is Celie Fesseldone. I'm a second year studying environmental engineering, and today I'm going to be talking to you about homelessness. In the article from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, the 2016 Annual Homeless Assessment Report to Congress states that on any given night in 2016, 549,928 people were homeless in the U.S. 68% of those homeless people were in emergency shelters, transitional housing programs, or safe havens. 32% were in unsheltered locations. Over 1 in 5 were children. Over 69% were over 24. 9% were between the ages of 18 and 24 years old. Many causes of homelessness. The article National Coalition for the Homeless, Why Are People Homeless?, tries to answer this question. One reason is foreclosure. Between April 2008 and April 2009, foreclosures rose by 32%. 40% of families facing eviction due to foreclosures were renters. 7 million households living on very low incomes are at high risk of foreclosure. Another reason is poverty. 10 years ago, 12.5% of the U.S. population, which is over 37 million people, lived in poverty. Another cause is housing. Since 2000, the incomes of low-income households has declined as rents continue to rise. Excessive waiting lists for public housing means that people must remain in shelters or inadequate housings for much longer periods of time. There's also a decline in public assistance programs. As a result of loss of benefits, low wages, and unstable employment, many families leaving welfare struggle to get medical care, food, and housing. Some other factors may be mental illness, drug addiction, lack of affordable health care, situational causes, which I'll talk about later. But the truth is, each homeless case is different from one another and must be treated as such. Based on the readings, the documentary, and class lectures, I define homelessness as the state of having no home, no shelter to perform basic human needs, and no sense of security. This can be further dissected by categorizing the state of homelessness, by discussing the causes, and by determining the specific circumstances of homelessness. Problems facing homelessness as described in the documentary Unheard Voices. As shown in the documentary, many homeless people struggle with shelters, centers, and hostels. In shelters, many have to wait in line for the night just to find out if there's a bed available for them to sleep in for the night. Hostels tend to be overcrowded, which leads to fights and stealing. Many centers have very strict rules that are hard to abide by. The shelters and hostels are often infected with bed bugs. Organizations like churches are constantly moving around from church to church, making it very hard to find a nearby place to stay for the night. Many people resort to living outside because shelter and hostel life is worse in their eyes. Many people face favoritism and discrimination from passerbys, police, healthcare providers, and by shelter workers. Many homeless people resort to begging, dumpster diving, prostitution, and many more desperate actions. Life without a home can lead to depression, which can also lead to abuse of drugs and alcohol. Today I will be talking about my dear friend Quinn, who faced homelessness in her senior year of high school. What makes this story very personal to me is that Quinn was able to stay with me for about 3 months while she was homeless. I'll be reading questions and answers from an interview I conducted with her via email. What caused your homelessness? Quinn's response was, I kind of chose to be homeless. I was in an extremely toxic environment, and I felt more comfortable sleeping in my car or at a friend's house than in my own bed. My mom's boyfriend at the time was very abusive physically and verbally, and I needed to get out of the environment. My mom ended up moving back in with my father, who she had divorced years before, back in Ionia, which was over 70 miles away. I asked, how long were you homeless? Quinn's response was, from early 2016 to mid-June of 2016. I just needed to finish high school, and then I could move back into my parents in Ionia. I asked Quinn, how much was she working while she was homeless? She said, I was still in high school, but I was working between 15 and 25 hours a week. I asked, what other activities were you involved in while being homeless? Quinn responded, I played tennis and had practice every day after school. I was also involved in student council, a STEM club, and I was the president of Key Club, which was a club focused on community service. What did you eat while you were homeless? Quinn responded, I had free lunch every day through the state, and the people I stayed with were incredibly gracious and would never let me go hungry. I honestly ate more at friend's house than I normally did at home. And what were the daily struggles that you faced while you were homeless? She responded, I think physically it wasn't as hard as mentally. It's really hard to just constantly be thinking that you're not welcome at home. I hated depending on other people, and I felt like such an inconvenience. I felt completely powerless. I knew I had always had somewhere to go. If it came down to it, I would drive the 80 miles to my dad's house, and I knew I would always be welcome there. I did that even when I didn't want to, just to give the people I was staying with a break. I definitely consider myself extremely lucky that the people in my life helped me and supported me. They wouldn't let me drive to my dad's after late tennis matches. They welcomed me into their homes and made sure I was safe, and I'm endlessly grateful for that. The best recommendation to combat homelessness is prevention. This requires tailoring to each individual state of near homelessness. No two cases are the same. It is important to implement supportive functions like short-term housing subsidy, emotional support, healthcare support, nutritional support, educational support, child welfare, job security, and employment opportunities. The list goes on. I think the best way to combat homelessness is to have a network on a local level that can tailor to each case of near homelessness and catch them before they fall. This is a tricky solution that requires a lot of work and attention, but something has to change. Nearly 5,500,000 homeless people a night is unacceptable. We must work to prevent homelessness instead of trying to fix it after it has already happened. Organizations like Street to Homes program in Canada are working in the right direction to combat homelessness. Street to Homes is specifically aimed at people who live outdoors, in parks, ravines, under bridges, on sidewalks, in laneways, alleys, stairwells, squats, and living in vehicles. However, they still fail on many fronts. The homes provided in Street to Homes are often temporary. People frequently move back into the city for a sense of normalcy and end up back into the homeless loop. People are badly placed, as shown in the example with Sharon, the crack addict, who is placed in an apartment where crack dealers lived nearby and quickly relapsed. There are often less resources when people are moved away from the city. Most of the people interviewed in the documentary showed that they had ambition, but they felt restricted by the system. I have never experienced direct homeless. When I was 6 years old, my mom left my dad and we didn't really have a home. We stayed with my mom's friend for a few months where I shared a room with my mom and we shared a bunk bed. We then lived in an apartment in a bad part of the city where I slept on a blow-up mattress on the floor of a studio apartment. We finally moved into a rental house that happens to be adjacent to the friend's house we stayed in for those months. I lived in 4 different houses in 1 year. I know this is not described as homelessness or anywhere close to it. However, I have lived with all my belongings in one bag, transporting them from place to place. If I were ever homeless, I think I would handle it well and adapt quickly. My biggest struggle would be finding food. Like my friend Quinn, too, I am vegetarian. I would face the same struggles of finding convenient, nutritious, cheap, and accessible food. Many people who are homeless face this challenge daily. Discuss today statistics relating to homelessness, causes of homelessness. I gave a general definition in an interview with a close friend who experienced temporary homelessness during high school. I gave my possible ways to combat homelessness and discussed how homelessness would affect me personally. I hope that after watching you can understand the dire problem that homelessness really is. In conclusion, it is obvious that homelessness is a major problem that needs to be dealt with. Prevention and catering of individual cases is a key to solving this widespread chronic problem. It is obvious that something must change.